All right, everybody, my name is Mark Dahlmeyer, and I will be the host for the session today. We're going to get this kicked off. We've got a lot of ground to cover. The topic today is cybersecurity and compliance trends, predictions, and investments for 2023. Again, my name is Mark Dahlmeyer, and I'll be your host. Here's the agenda that we're going to cover. We're going to do some introductions. I'll give you a little bit about my background, and then we'll quickly transition into cyber and compliance trends. We'll do a 2022 recap in terms of some of the trends and some of the threats that we saw in 2022. We will provide an evolution of cybercrime and cyber attacks. So we're going to walk through the evolution of hacking, cybercrime, cyber attacks, and that will transition us into predictions for 2023. We're going to cover some of the top investment areas for reducing risk and what the next 6 months looks like in terms of if you're looking to expand or develop a cybersecurity and regulatory compliance program for your organization. We're going to provide some recommendations on how to begin, and then we have a couple of offers for the attendees. So again, thank you very much for plugging in today. My name is Mark Dahlmeyer. I'm an industry veteran and researcher, so I've got 27 years in the technology industry, spent the last decade in cybersecurity risk and compliance. I'm a founder of multiple technology and consulting companies. I've been a CEO, president, CSO, CMO. When I'm not running and building companies, I'm a turnaround and transformation consultant to the industry. I also sit on a number of boards of directors. I'm a board advisor, and I'm an avid industry researcher and analyst and speaker. I think over the last 20 years, I've audited and assessed over 400 different companies. So thank you so much for plugging in. These are some of the organizations that I've either consulted to or worked with in the past, just to give you a little bit more background in terms of the types of industries that I've worked within and the types of organizations that I've consulted to. So let's talk a little bit about some of the cybersecurity trends in 2022. Again, there's a lot to unpack here. Let me net this out. We have seen a significant growth of volume of cyber attacks. The global volume of cyber attacks in 2022 reached an all-time high in Q4 with an average of 1,168 weekly attacks per organization's reporting. Cyber attacks are increasing worldwide, with 38% more cyber attacks per week on corporate networks in 2022 as compared to 2021. The US experienced a 57% increase in overall cyber attacks last year as compared to the year before that. And education, research organizations, government, and healthcare are the segments that have experienced the most cyber attacks. US healthcare organizations actually experienced over 1,410 cyber attacks per week, and that equates to 86% higher than the year before. When you take a look at some of the recent attacks and breaches of Okta, GitHub, Rackspace, Circle CI, and LastPass, it is really clear that these attacks and these data breaches, cyber criminals, hackers, hacktivists, and nation states, it's pretty clear that those entities are absolutely targeting and going after source code. They're going after software, they're going after the supply chain, and they're aggressively trying to either embed malware in that source code, in those code repositories, or they're looking to hold those organizations for ransom. So in the case of Rackspace, that was a ransomware attack, and a large percentage of their infrastructure was impacted by that. So what else are we seeing? Well, 62% of breaches are being caused by third-party supplier or vendor vulnerabilities. Right now, across all industry segments, supply chains are absolutely in the crosshairs of attacks. The average data breach now costs $9.4 million in the US and about $4.35 million globally. Now, that's an increase over the previous year. The average healthcare data breach now costs on average $10 million. And that's an increase of over $1 million from the year before. There's some interesting things going on with AI-enabled technology. I'm not sure if those of you who are plugging in today have researched Chat GPT, but that is a massive AI engine and suite of technologies that has been commercialized and is now publicly available. So some of the concerns that AI-driven platforms and these types of technologies create in the marketplace is these AI-based engines and technologies can absolutely enable hackers to generate malicious code, malicious emails, and to create and generate disinformation, malinformation, and misinformation at greater speeds and more automated rates. So we're very concerned in terms of how to control and how to mitigate the risk associated with AI-based technologies. So as these technologies hit the market, it'll be interesting to see how they change the paradigm that we're all dealing with. So those are some of the top cybersecurity trends in 2022 that we're witnessing. Just in summary, a continuous growing tsunami of cyber attacks and data breaches, and that tsunami is not slowing down. If anything, it's increasing. Let's talk about what we're seeing in regulatory compliance. There's a growing tsunami of cyber attacks and data breaches, as we've been mentioning, and so federal governments, industries, they're taking a look at new cybersecurity, data privacy, data breach disclosure laws, and they're aggressively passing these laws. If you plug into the website reginfo.gov, that is a government website that tracks regulatory compliance and what regulations and what laws and legislation is now being passed by what department within the federal government. Last time I took a look at this website, there were over 100 different regulations that were under review by various government organizations. Now, regulated industries are experiencing increases in data privacy and data breach litigation, settlements, and payouts. So settlements, litigation, payouts, fines, they're all increasing. The reality is, within regulatory compliance, new federal disclosure laws and state-level data privacy regulations are increasing the cost and complexity of adhering and managing regulatory compliance. There are now trillions of revenue at risk for organizations that are operating in multiple industries due to these new laws and regulations. The Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification that's being enforced by the Department of Defense on the defense industry base, that impacts over 300,000 organizations in the US. There's $680 billion of annual contracts that are now at risk because federal government has deemed and has mandated that if you're a supplier or provider, prime contractor or subcontractor, providing goods and services to the defense industry or the federal government, thou shalt become CMMC compliant. We've seen the passing of the FTC safeguards rule. There's an updated FTC safeguards rule that has passed. This impacts organizations that are participating in loan originations. So that includes auto dealers, payday loan, mortgage brokers, and about a dozen other types of organizations across different industries. Those organizations must deploy specific cybersecurity technologies and specific cybersecurity controls and data privacy controls, or else they run the risk of being fined, or they run the risk of losing their ability to originate loans. So there's about $1.8 trillion of annual loan origination a year that occurs just within those three segments that I mentioned. The reality is 65% of compliance officers and executives that are surveyed expect compliance budgets to stay the same. So they're being expected to do more with less, and only 30% are actually expected to grow their budgets. At the same time, the rate of regulatory compliance change and the lack of compliance expertise are top issues facing organizations within the US. And over 66% of those executives and respondents expect an increase in staffing costs. Why? Because there's not enough staff. There's a shortage of staff. There's a shortage of capability and talent. So now there's a talent war developing in the marketplace. around regulatory compliance. So those are some of the compliance trends that we've seen in 2022. Let's talk a little bit about insurance trends. The cyber security insurance market was about $9.2 billion in 2021. And over the next few years, it's expected to reach over $30 billion. Now, cyber policy premiums are expected to increase anywhere between 15 and 50% or more. I will share with you that the customers and the partners that we talk to in the marketplace every day, every week, they're experiencing anywhere between 50% and 200% increases in policy premiums. The number of cyber policies in force grew by 21% in 2020. First time cyber insurance buyers grew 26% in 2016 to over 50% of transactions in 2021. And that just demonstrates the fact that there's been a tsunami of cyber attacks and data breaches. There's heavy scrutiny from regulatory compliance, and now the business insurance marketplace has jumped on board. They begin to tighten down their underwriting processes and their requirements in terms of even entering underwriting. And so insurers are actually looking for ways to increase real-time visibility into their client and their portfolio's risk so they can respond accordingly. Now, cybersecurity insurance is not an appropriate risk strategy. It's part of a risk strategy that you can deploy. But the reality is some insurers are actually pulling out of the market. And a lot of insurers are now revisiting how they view and how they interpret a cybersecurity attack, and if they're actually going to be covering cybersecurity breaches and risks. So we already mentioned that insurers are demanding specific technologies or controls prior to underwriting. And these are just table stakes. For example, many organizations won't even allow you to enter underwriting if you don't have multi-factor authentication in place. If you don't have some type of immutable backup, if you don't have a backup and disaster recovery plan, that's not only a plan, but that's been tested. If you don't have if you don't have any type of data encryption, encryption at rest, encryption at flight, and there are a number of other minimums that these insurers are now asking for. The reality is, a number of years ago, insurers started looking into the marketplace and they started bundling cybersecurity scanning, detection, alerting, and response technologies into their portfolio, or they're partnering with third parties like MarSuite to provide those types of scanning, monitoring, risk management, and alerting-based technologies. Now, there are some insurers that have purchased technology organizations, and they've actually assimilated those technologies into their overarching solution and their bundles. And so there are many policies that you can go buy today that actually include some level of cybersecurity scanning, alerting, detection, and response. And so it'll be interesting to see how the market actually evolves over time. Policy and coverage structures can vary greatly by providers. And so this is putting even more pressure and more cost and more time on the shoulders of the end customer who are trying to get coverage in place. Again, these are some of the insurance trends that we've been seeing, not just in 2022, but over the last number of years. Let's talk a little bit about the evolution of cybercrime and some of the predictions. So I'm going to turn the Wayback Machine back a couple of years ago. So these are actually slides that I presented at a number of conferences in 2017 and 2018, just to kind of set the context here. Today, what we're experiencing from a cyber attack perspective is a lot of ransomware. We're seeing a lot of fraud, and we're seeing, candidly, a lot of larceny. So we're seeing a lot of theft. Now, if you really think about the evolution of cybercrime, it's no different than just typical crime that we've been witnessing for thousands of years, right? If you think about it, like the Patty Hearst kidnapping. So for those of us that are old enough to remember these things, what's interesting is, right, ransoms, the act of ransom from a criminal perspective, right, dates way back to even before Julius Caesar. But Many people don't know that Julius Caesar was actually kidnapped by pirates. He was held for ransom. Now, they negotiated his release, and he happened to get a garrison and go back and kill all the pirates, slaughtered all the pirates after they released him. But if you think about this, ransom, larceny, and fraud, these candidly are just criminal acts that have been around for thousands of years, and now they've been weaponized with technology. So in 2016, 2017, and between 2017 and 2018, what we saw was the rise of ransomware as a service. In 2018 to 2019, we saw the rise of crimeware as a service. So what do I mean by that? Well, within the dark web, criminal syndicates, hackers, nation states, they set up these service bureaus to actually help organizations and individuals that want to commit cybercrime. They will provide you with the database. They will provide you with the malicious code. They will actually launch the attack on your behalf, and they will do a revenue share with you. Oftentimes, you don't even need to give them a deposit to do that. So this is what we're dealing with in terms of the dark web and the dark and cybercrime, just in general. This is why it's so difficult to slow these attacks down, and it's nearly impossible to shut down these cyber criminal groups on the dark web. They can pop up, they can develop a cyber group, right, through some type of exchange or a marketplace, and they can shut it down instantaneously if they figure out that that law enforcement, right, or some type of government agency is onto them. And if you take a look at larceny, look at Capone, right? Look at the traditional mob organizations. They were really focused on theft, coercion, and money laundering. Well, a business email compromise attack is no different than that, right? Business email compromise attacks really started taking hold in 2016, and they've grown. Their severity and their damages have grown every year since then, right? But a business email compromise attack is all about theft of data, theft of money. So business email compromise attacks often drive somebody within the organization to disclose credentials, to wire money, right, to a cyber criminal or a hacking organization. And business email compromise attacks are very targeted, focused attacks. There are a lot of various toolkits and malware kits that are out there today. And so with ransomware as a service and crimeware as a service, you now have business email compromise as a service capabilities in the dark web as well. If you take a look at just pure fraud, right, the Victor Lustig case of selling the Eiffel Tower. So Victor Lustig, this is an incredible story. He actually didn't sell the Eiffel Tower once, he sold it twice. So this is an individual in the 1930s that sold the Eiffel Tower, impersonated a government official, completed the transaction, counterfeited the documents, etc. Well, what we're seeing today, so the evolution of that type of attack is a business process compromise attack, meaning that there's a lot of impersonation of executives, there's impersonation of business units, there's even impersonation of entire brands. And we actually call that brand jacking. So if you think about this, what we were predicting in 2018 was you were going to see more as a service factories being developed in the dark web. Cyber criminals, hacktivists, and hackers were going to automate the service delivery of cyber attacks. And they've done that, and they've done it really successfully. The business email compromise attack evolution, what we said was, look, this is going to move beyond just corporations. We're going to start seeing an integrated physical attack with a cyber attack. And that's going to require additional integration, additional orchestration. And what they're going to be doing is they will be attacking public areas. So whether it's public transportation, whether it's a grid or a utility, a baseball game, right? A football game, right? Some type of a soccer game, some type of big event. And we've actually witnessed that. You know, we've had transportation, underground transportation, trains, railroad, et cetera, actually shut down by cyber attacks. And people were actually held for hostage. In 2018, we were predicting that we were going to see more brand jacking, more business disintermediation, and more fake and counterfeit storefronts pop up. Well, that's exactly what's happened. So in 2018, we were predicting, hey, look, we're going to see cyber hostage situations. We're going to see the development and the implementation of the criminal enterprise 2.0. So the dark web is going to change. It's going to evolve, and it's candidly going to become more mature. So more self-service applications, more as-a-service factories, more automation, more integration with physical with physical cyber criminals across the globe. And we're actually seeing that. And again, these attacks represent the technical weaponization of criminal attacks that have been around for thousands of years. So here we are, trying to address criminal attacks and criminal behaviors that's been around for thousands of years that's now technically weaponized. This is why this is so difficult to address. We will not undo thousands and thousands of years of criminal activity, okay? What we need to do is be diligent, we need to be forward thinking, and we need to lean into this and say, hey, look, this is about human nature, right? We're not going to reverse the trend. How do we get ahead of the trend? So some of the things, and I've already covered some of this, but these were some of the other predictions that we were making in 2018. We believed that the attacks were going to be more targeted on individuals, on executives, on IT administrators, and then supply chain. We projected that IoT would create a massive problem, right? And Internet of Things technology, Internet-enabled technologies would be exploited to gain full situational command and control over utilities, right? Over public systems, over stadiums, et cetera. We have seen these attacks take place over the last 5 years. One of the things that I mentioned was brand jacking. We saw a large increase in fake business brands being set up, fake business ads being dropped on the internet, right? And so this was directly focused on business B2C, so business to consumer initially, but now it's B2B. So we have real consumers or real suppliers or businesses or clients of businesses now putting their information into fake storefronts and fake websites, right? And cyber criminals are taking their data, stealing their data, and they're basically selling that data on the dark web, or they're committing fraud and they're committing crimes with that stolen information. These were some of the evolutionary areas of the dark web that we were projecting in 2018. There was going to be distributed attack methods. There's going to be broad exploit factories, focused exploit brand jacking, and targeted exploit hostage. So if you look at this looks very much like an organizational capability diagram. Well, that's what the dark web is. If you think about how the dark web has evolved and matured over time, they have evolved and matured the dark web and the operations within the dark web just like you would a company, and a large globally distributed company at that. So we were making these predictions a number of years ago. Actually, if you think about brand jacking, and there's some links in this presentation, this is actually a recording and an interview that we did for the media around brand jacking. But so this was right 2018. Look at 2021. Mid-year 2021, FBI warns that cyber criminals are using fake job listings to target applicants and stealing applicants' information. Actually, that had been going on for over 7 years. There were some large global organizations that had their HR, human resources, and job websites actually counterfeited, and some people were sending visas, they were sending passports, right? They were sending their credentials as part of a fake job listing to be considered for employment. And so this has been going on for a long time. December of last year, FBI issues a public service announcement. Cyber criminals impersonating brands using search engine advertising services to defraud users. Again, these threats and these risks continue. Now, if you take a look at the hacking evolution and timeline and the propagation of hacking end cyber crime within our culture. This is the timeline, right? 1960s, MIT engineers and professors were using hacking methods to hack trains to enhance train performance. It moved to hacking telephony, right? So you can get free long distance. You saw the advent of Tron and war games, right? Hit the media. So hacking became popular. It became part of popular culture. Between 84 and 86, you saw the Hackers Manifesto get published, right? And for those of us that have been around for a while, Max Headroom was a television broadcast that was actually hacked. Now, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but as you start looking at this, you begin to realize that, yes, over the last 60 to 70 years, hacking has evolved, and it's gotten significantly worse and more integrated into our culture every decade, right? Internet gets created. The internet provides a framework and a kind of a super highway for hackers to reach out and create madness, right? And create havoc across the internet. So you saw Sneakers, you saw Jurassic Park, right? You saw Office Space. Like, these are all very popular old movies that had hacking within them or were based upon hacking. Kevin Mitnick, who was the co-founder of KnowBe4, was arrested in '95, did some time, and then came over to from being a black hat to become a white hat. Bug bounties get launched. By 2013, there's over 30,000 websites are being hacked daily. And between 2014 and 2018, what you saw was eBay, Target, right? Edgar, IRS, Sony, all these big Fortune brands getting hacked. And then the hacking groups actually turning on themselves and then begin to hack themselves. So what's interesting about this is if we fast track to kind of where we're at today, what we've seen is in 2019, there was a lot of targeted attacks on social media, on states, education, healthcare, labs, manufacturers, and the supply chain. And that actually continued. COVID actually made it worse because COVID and the election. So those were polarizing moments in the marketplace. You had a lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation and malinformation and fraud that was being launched into the marketplace. If you take a look at this website on the left down at the bottom corner, the world's biggest data breaches and hacks, that's a fantastic link that will show you visually. It's an actual animated page. You can go back 10 or 15 years and you can see the fact is the data breaches and attacks aren't slowing down. Actually, the breaches are getting worse. Some of these other screen grabs are examples of some of the fraud and some of the misinformation, some of the disinformation that was published. By 2021, what we saw was a lot of a massive increase in ransomware, in double extortion techniques, business email compromise, and phishing. So critical infrastructure, water, right? The pipeline goes down, supply chains go down, right? So and really attacking the remote workers. 2022, what did we see? We saw a lot of DDoS, a lot of botnet, a lot of ransomware, and a lot of automation in terms of attacks. I think publicly, globally, the public became aware of how cyber attacks can undermine countries, right? So we saw the attack on Ukraine. The fact is, and this is a link to the timeline on the far right bottom corner, this is a very detailed timeline of the cyber attacks and infrastructure, critical infrastructure attacks that Ukraine witnessed before the incursion. And so what's interesting about this is this goes back years. It's not, oh, hey, here's the 12 months before the invasion. Oh no, it's multiple years. So these types of techniques and attacks are being used by nation states, by enemies of the US. So this is what we've been witnessing, and this is what we've been dealing with. Now, the growth of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation is scary. So misinformation is the wrong info, but not on purpose. Disinformation is just a pure flat out lie, and malinformation is legitimate content that is manipulated for a specific purpose. So those of you that had watched the election and kind of followed the election laws and what was happening over the last couple of years might have known that Maricopa County was a very hotbed of activity. So the director of IT, Michael Moore, chief information security officer, and their entire IT team actually set up a war room, an information security war room, to stop the spread of malinformation, disinformation, and misinformation. And I'm going to get into the reasons why, but this is a great video that they produced for the public. So it's publicly available. Watch this video. It's about 35 to 40 minutes, and it provides you a really good understanding of the election process, the misinformation and the malinformation, disinformation that was being spread around the Maricopa County election process. By the way, Maricopa County is one of the largest voter populations in the country. And so it's very interesting state of events. What's really scary, and we'll get into some of the attacks in a minute, is there's a massive growth of synthetic content and deep fakes in the information. We saw this during the Ukraine attack, with the Ukrainian president actually, a cyber group created a deep fake video of the president actually surrendering to Russia. And Facebook had published this, right? So social media becomes an avenue or a super highway for mal, and misinformation. Cyber criminals are beginning to use deep fake videos to interview for remote work and to facilitate phishing and reconnaissance and information gathering campaigns. You know, this actor actually did a fantastic deep fake video of former President Obama, and because he's a voice actor and he could duplicate Obama's voice almost perfectly, when you layer in, right, his voice over Obama's video, and the video is created by deep fake video technology, you don't know it's not Obama. So this is scary, right? These are some scary times that we're living in. I'm going to go back to the Maricopa County situation. So in the case of Maricopa County situation, the Maricopa election results were audited by a third party, and the third party audit was driven by social media support. And via social media, various groups were leveraging social media to spread mal, and misinformation about the election process and what was actually going on. So they were able to rally conspiracy theorists around this process. They actually leveraged social media for donations. They were routinely posting unofficial findings of the vote. And what was worse is armed citizens began to mobilize using social media, and threats were beginning to get made on public officials, and not just public officials, but their families and their spouses were actually being trolled. They were being followed, and they were being threatened. So, you know, this sits outside of corporate IT, right? This is a bigger problem beyond corporate IT and just cybersecurity and regulatory compliance. But we bring this up because if your organization has a social media presence, it can be exploited and it can be leveraged. So we all need, again, we all need to be focused. We need to lean into this, and we really need to be mindful that social media can become an enabler. This is what we've seen over the last few decades, the evolution of adversaries. We know nation states and enemies of the US continue. We saw the creation of white hats, right? So individuals that were interested in hacking for good, for prosperity, for efficiency's sake. And then you saw, of course, the evolution of black hats, cyber criminals, hacktivists, cyber criminal syndicates, basically mob and criminal syndicates, right? Think about this from 1940, 1950, 1960s, but now just active and enabled via cyber criminals on the dark web. And now we've seen opportunists and the public are now being manipulated and driven to launch attacks, either physical or cyber. And these are ideologically driven people, and they're very malicious. So they have malicious intent. This is what we're experiencing. So here's my observation. This is not a technology war, or it's not just a technology war. We're actually fighting against embedded human behavior. We're now fighting against ideology. And so again, it's not just about throwing technology at this problem. Throwing technology at the problem will not solve the problem. We need to fundamentally change the way that we're thinking and recognize that individuals and people that we would have never suspected as criminals and terrorists can actually be activated to facilitate attacks. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that we need to question the status quo. Look, there's a cyber criminal industrial revolution underway, and it's accelerating. The 2024 election, so I'm looking forward beyond 2023, could actually be worse than 2022. Why? Well, because of deep fakes, because of AI, right? Because of the advancements of social media and these platforms and these technologies. I predict we could see increased polarization across the US, right? Based upon parties. And that's going to lead to more attacks. So we need to continue to track and monitor, continuously scan, and continuously be mindful of emerging adversaries against our organizations. We need to start watching for brand jacking. We need to start paying attention to websites, to counterfeit websites, fraudulent ads, or job postings associated with our organizations. And so we need to be able to mobilize and track social media to see if adversaries are mobilizing. There are some other technologies that are out there in the marketplace today. I don't have that in this presentation, but if you're interested in what technologies Maricopa County deployed, I'll share that with you. I actually got sign off from Lester, the CISO, to talk about this, but we'll share this information. And I have to tell you that using artificial intelligence to sort, analyze social media in large pools of data is critical for any organization that is of any decent size, whether it's state, local, federal, commercial organization. Artificial intelligence platforms are readily available, just like they are for criminal use. They're readily available for our use to analyze this data and to sort through large pools of information to identify threats and risks. At the end of the day, we have to rethink how we're training our cyber and our risk teams and our IT teams. We have to look at different skill development, and candidly, we should be looking and considering counseling for some of these employees. Going through the process of looking at social media, addressing social media trolls, addressing adversaries on social media, and just adversaries in general takes a toll mentally and emotionally on security engineers, on security analysts, on risk engineers, and IT personnel. And so what we saw over the last few years was an increase in anxiety, an increase in mental disorders and emotional disorders within a population of people that are actually doing this work. So we need to try to get ahead of that. So what are some of the top investments and areas for reducing risk within your organization? I think that number one, we need to get our arms around the assets. So what IT assets and what devices do we have on the network? And who is actually on the network? Who is getting access to the network? We need to validate those assets, and we need to validate the identity of the people accessing the network. And this comes back to deploying a zero trust model within your organization. We need to lock the doors and the windows, meaning that we need to be looking at email security, network security, cloud security, off-premise security, and data level security, making sure that we have the appropriate controls in place and the protection in place. At the end of the day, we need to control the life cycle of the assets. So address vulnerability management, configuration management, access management. We need to back up the business or the organization or the data within the organization. Having a business continuity and disaster recovery plan is great, but if you don't have immutable backups, you have a gap. If you haven't tested your business continuity disaster recovery plan, or you haven't gone through the process of trying to reinflate, right, the backup data and go through that process, absolutely should be on the top things that you do going forward. We need to always be watching. Look, doing a pen test and doing a vulnerability scan or a risk assessment, that's fantastic. Yes, I agree. An organization needs to do that. But what those engagements and those projects do is they give you a snapshot and a point in time. So you're actually in your car driving down the road and you're looking in your rearview mirror at what you just passed. You don't have visibility into real-time risk and threats and attacks that are going on through your windshield. And that's what a SIM, and that's what a SOC, and that's what these automated continuous monitoring, scanning, alerting, and risk management platforms like MarSuite do for you. You need to take a look at programs and procedures. We talked about business process compromise attacks. We talked about business email compromise attacks. These are attacks that hack the human, and they look for weakness within your internal operating procedures and your controls. So we need to be looking at uplifting and enhancing our process, our procedures around compliance, around legal, around operations, and then do some training around that. At the end of the day, we need to rethink our governance model and our risk model. So are we doing a tops-down governance model that starts with the key stakeholders, shareholders, or board of directors, executives, right? Operating executives, right? CIOs, et cetera, all the way down, right? To the bottom of the organization. And then are we doing it bottoms up again? And then do we have some type of cross matrix responsibility? Does everybody understand that we just can't throw technology at this problem and expect the problem to go away? Again, because these are challenges and problems we've been faced with for centuries. So hacking the human is pervasive. Security education, training, and awareness is commonplace in a lot of organizations. And multi-factor authentication, right? Encryption, layered approach to security is spoken about on every one of these types of cybersecurity and compliance related webinars and panels and discussions. The zero trust approach is absolutely required. And then we need to rethink, how are we addressing new adversaries? How are we mitigating the risk of social media and social media enabled threats? So what can you do over the next 6 months? Well, determine the capabilities and gaps around best practices, and then layer in your capabilities and gaps around being able to monitor and investigate social media activities. Engage with your executives. Educate executives in the C-suite on best practices and these emerging risks, and increase awareness. And then absolutely update your business continuity, disaster recovery, and incident response plans. Tabletop exercise, run through simulations of what happens if we get a ransomware attack, what happens if we have a business email compromise attack, what happens if we discover that we've been hacked and there's a business process compromise attack, meaning that there's a cyber criminal group or a hacking group that's actually active within our organization, and they're exfiltrating data, or they have command and control. Like, what do we do? So there are specific protocols and processes to address ransom, extortion, business email compromise, and some of these other attacks and risks. And those should be integrated into your plans. As we discussed, watch for brand jacking, social media mobilization from adversaries against your organization or against the organizations that you sell to, that you support from a client perspective, especially if you're doing work with state, local education, or the federal government, DoD. You're in their supply chain, you are absolutely being attacked. Your systems are being scanned, and cyber criminals and nation states are looking for ways into your network to get access to CUI or other type of information, or to use your organization as a hub for criminal activity without you even knowing it. Document and report your team's progress and positive impact on the organization on a quarterly basis. And then again, just continue to assess, refine capabilities based upon what we talked about today. That's a lot to digest. At the end of the day, how do you actually begin? Well, in my opinion, in my experience over the last few decades, working with organizations on these topics, is the first step is acknowledging that these trends exist, getting an understanding of what the current state is that you're dealing with. Understand that ransomware, malware, right, DDoS, some of these other attacks are commonplace, they're automated, they're going 24/7, 365. No organization is too big or too small. And once you're actually breached and what your information is on the dark web, it's like swimming with sharks with a bloody arm. The blood's in the water, right? And the sharks attack. And so cyber insurance coverage is not a viable risk strategy. It is a part of a strategy, but definitely need to invest in controls, in technologies, and partner with organizations to get that done. So how do you begin? Well, we suggest that you design and deploy some level of cybersecurity program and resources. So you've got a run book, you've got some policies, you've got some procedures, and you've got some resources. In parallel, you should be scanning and updating your system, working to identify what assets are on the network, what are the critical vulnerabilities, and how am I addressing vulnerability management, and then patch management. In parallel, educating and training employees, incentivizing employees. Look, security education, training, and awareness platforms are plenty. And there's some very interesting organizations out there, Hook Security, Fin Security, others, that are doing some phenomenal, innovative things around training and awareness and simulations. And so definitely take a look at those platforms and those organizations and change the way that you're thinking about enablement. Passwords, update, change, and manage passwords. With LastPass, right, being breached, I think that just goes to show that, hey, look, no technology is unbreachable and no company is unbreachable. And so you need a layered approach and a zero trust approach to your technology and your borders and the inside of your organization. And lastly, try to secure and harden your systems and applications. I know that's a tall order, especially if you're an organization and you've been around decades, right? Or you've been around a century, because you might be running legacy technologies within your organization. You might have technologies and applications and hardware that you actually can't patch, you can't harden, you can't take down because they're either mission critical or they're critical care systems and applications. But do your best to partition those systems, right, and lock them down. Again, your program should be based on zero trust with a multi-factor authentication approach. You need continuous monitoring, scanning, detection, and alerting. Again, you need to be looking through your windshield at the threats and the attacks that are coming at you, not looking in the rearview mirror at what just happened a week ago. Inventory, scan, patch, and fix, and remove those old systems, as we talked about, and we already talked about some of this other. One of my recommendations is take a look at third-party vendor and third-party scanning assessments, risk assessments, vulnerability testing, etc. Not just corporate-wide, but take a look at your supply chain and your key vendors. You can't do this by yourself. It doesn't matter how large your organization is, how big your budget is. The fact is there's a 7-figure shortage of talent in cyber. There's a mounting and growing shortage of compliance talent. And this country has been battling a shortage of STEM students and STEM talent for decades, right? So you can't get through this all by yourself. But there are some fantastic managed security providers, compliance as a service providers, right? Cloud providers, and some key experts that we can plug you into. So, little information about MAR Suite. If you're looking for a solution, a set of services, you're not looking to add to your technical debt, meaning you're not just looking to go buy another piece of technology and let it sit in the infrastructure and you have to worry about maintaining it and managing it, right, et cetera. Nobody wants to add to their technical debt right now. What organizations want is an as-a-service model. They want somebody that's capable of deploying various technologies and services and being held accountable to an SLA, right? And so if you're interested in getting your arms around vulnerability and IT scanning, IT asset inventory, incident management, incident response, network traffic analysis, threat alerting, and threat analysis, and then you want a very easy to understand dashboard and risk score that shows kind of a common operating picture of risk, and then provides you the ability to actually understand the risk and then mobilize around the risk and remove the risk out of the environment, then MAR Suite is a fantastic suite of technologies and capabilities for you to look at. Some of the things that we've been doing around MAR Suite is adding security operations, vulnerability management, remediation, incident response, phishing and training, assessment and testing, and GRC, so governance, risk, and compliance platform. So if you're looking for a comprehensive security or compliance as a service offering, we'd love to talk to you. We have a couple of offers for those of you that sat through this webinar. Number one, if get paid for your opinion. So we actually launched a number of MAR Suite cyber and compliance research surveys to the marketplace. You can get I think the survey is anywhere between 12 and 15 questions. You can get a $25 Amazon card for participating. And this is an offer that was left over from the last insurance panel that we hosted. But if you want to receive a complimentary cybersecurity posture review or a cybersecurity insurance coverage review, just reach out to us. So with that, I'm going to pause and see if any of the participants have any questions. No questions? All right, team. Hey, thank you so much. We are recording this session, so we're going to be publishing this session. And so if for those of you who are expecting some peers or colleagues to be on this, once we post the replay, you can forward the link to those individuals. Please feel free to plug into our future webinars and panels. So Thriving in Uncertain Times is going to be on January 19th, and then Funding Your Cybersecurity and Compliance Programs is January 24th. We have some very interesting news to share about some of the incentive and rebate programs that we're bringing into the marketplace around MAR Suite that actually can help fund and offset your cost of your cybersecurity and compliance program. So with that, if there are not any questions, we're going to wrap up, and I'm going to say thank you all for attending. Thank you all. We'll talk to you soon.